yourself again. But it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on the thoughts I cannot say to you. If I don't say the words, then maybe it's not.
Good evening, welcome to NUFC Matters with me, Steve Wraith. As always, Wednesday night is Geordies here, Geordies there, joined by George, Mitch, Stu, Steve and Steve. Saudi Gaza Al-Walid has been, I don't know, he's been treated like royalty in Saudi. Like, I think he's getting a few critics as well, according to Stu, but he's having a good night off. So good luck to him. I hope he has a good night. I'm sure he'll have a story to tell next week. As you know, we're doing season review, and as Stu's quite rightly pointed out, I've inadvertently put 2021 on the latest thing on Twitter. So don't worry, we're not going to be talking about how good Steve Bruce was and how good a signing Andy Carroll was. No, we're actually going to focus on last season. So don't forget as well, we are still going to do Ask George. So if you've got a question for George, I will still fit that into the show at some point tonight. But don't ask him about this season. Okay, best signing, George. Best signing. That's what we're going to start with. Who was your best signing of this season?
I mean, in January, we did some good business, is how I would put it. But the best one for me, because of his class and he's got lots of other things, was Kieran Trippier. I mean, after all the rubbish about Akbar and Lahore, and they're saying nobody of any standing is going to come north of Watford. They're not going to come to Newcastle for this. They'd rather go to Brentford and all the rest of it. And Kieran Trippier comes through the door. And for me, he's been magnificent because even when he was injured, he clearly was a great motivation in the dressing room. He was there at every game, pushing his mates along and all the rest of it. So for me, Kieran Trippier, he actually is a leader for me. It would not surprise me at some stage if Eddie Howe decides to ask him to take the captain's armband, depending on what happens to Lascelles in the summer. So Kieran Trippier, sheer class, England international, who's I think is going to have a big part to play in the revival of Newcastle United.
Yeah, okay. No surprise to hear you say that, George. Mitch, are you following in your dad's footsteps and going for Kieran Trippier, or you picked somebody else?
Oh, I'm going to go for Bruno. It's a long time since I've seen us sign a player of his absolute quality. He just uses it. He uses class, he uses quality, but also a statement. Again, tying in with you know, people like Akbar saying, oh, they're not saying this and they're not saying that. To get him secured and to have him come in, even in the situation we're in when he was signed, to bring the positivity and the smile on his face. He's lifted all the South American players up by coming in and being around. And it's a statement in itself to sign him that's going to help us sign more players in this window. Because everybody's going to look at him and say, hey, look what he's managed to achieve there. We'll want a piece of that. Everybody's singing his bloody name. We'll want a piece of that. And so going ahead like that, I think he brings so much more than the football as well. Again, like Trippier, off the pitch, he's well liked. Has added something to the dressing room. Hasn't rocked the boat in any way, shape or form. Is another one that you seem to see with a smile on his face all the time. I don't think I've ever seen him look miserable in a picture. And it shows that they're signing the right calibre of people, not just the right calibre of player. And I'm excited to see what he can do going forward with more quality around him.
Yeah, me too. Stu, your signing of the season?
I just need to apologise for doing the show sober because I'm in Saudi before I start. So if people don't understand this, that's the reason. I'm agreeing with Gibbo from last night. I'd go for Eddie Howe. I think because without him, none of this would have happened. And I think when we brought Eddie Howe in, we know that he'd been interviewed by the Ashley regime and his name got put forward again. And he gave a fantastic interview. He did everything right and he's been true to his word and what he's delivered. But most importantly, when Eddie Howe came in, he his players now seem to reflect his image. He oozed confidence and he had belief in his own ability, and it's lifted the gloom and doom of Bruce, because that was the last remnant of the Ashley regime, wasn't it? Because Ashley had gone and we needed Bruce out for the club to move forward. And when he did go, it was a case of who would come in. And even when he did come in, as George mentioned there was people like Agbonlo and lots of other critics saying they've got no chance, he's a failure, he's this, he's that. And the time he's had off, it shows that he's went and studied the game and made himself better. And that's what he's done with the players. He's made them better and he's put belief in them. And I think without him, none of this would happen, and none of the players would have bought into the future of what Newcastle were promising. You know, when they're having talks with the likes of Trippier, with the likes of Bruno, I think another manager might not be able to sell it as well as he has. And I think the results have exceeded expectations for sure. But I just think Eddie Howe is the best manager we've had. And I would go back to say up until Keegan. Potentially, he can be the first one to win us a trophy in decades. So for me, Eddie Howe has to be the sign of the season at the club, mate.
Great stuff. Steve Hasty.
That's a good one, that, wasn't it? Hey, that was from completely the wide end. I didn't expect that one. Well done, Stewie. Completely through everybody. It's between two for me. It's Trippier or Bruno. Which one am I going to go for? Trippier, we had all the way through December. It looked like he was going to sign. The build-up, people were talking about it, was the buzz, £12 million, £15 million, £8 million. We heard it all. He was coming, he wasn't coming. According to the, if you balanced up what the Northern press was saying against the Southern press. So Trippier was always going to be the one. And then all of a sudden, we snap up Bruno towards the end. And for sheer, the fact that he the only reason I'm going to go for Bruno, I think, is because of the Trippier injury. I know that Trippier's signing was influential and it probably led to other players coming and probably leads to other players coming as well in the future. But for me, when you bring a player in, you bring him in and then you don't play him for a few weeks and you gradually phase him in, and then he repairs you with 5 goals and 5 bookings in that period of time, and he's scoring at home and away. And he's scoring good goals as well, not tap-ins or anything like that. So because of that, and because we've realised, as Mitch says, that we've got a player there, a player that we've never had for a number of seasons at Newcastle United, someone with absolute star quality in the key area of the field, the midfield, that we all love to watch, and boy, is he a player. So for me, I'm going to go for Bruno.
Okay, Steve Wilkinson.
Right, Steve, you're going to have a cast and vote, because I'm going to go with George. So it's 2 each between Trippier and Bruno. I think I go, and it was very close. I mean, you could put a case for everybody, in left field, as Stu's done, and as I heard Gibbo do last night. The manager arguably has to be the one, because we wouldn't have the others without it. But I think if we just looked at players, the reason I went for Trippier is he set a sort of statement of intent, because we weren't. It was clear that having got a current England international, a player coming from a top side in Spain, and that we weren't going to mess around with the sort of signings we'd had. We didn't even get, or we did get from in the Ashley era, in the latter years particularly, and it set the standard. His performances, he only played 5 full games because of the injury, but we saw in those 5 full games and his involvement after that, what sort of leadership he was. I think, as was said earlier on, that I think he'd be captain next season, because even if Lascelles is still here, I cannot see him getting many games. He might be in the squad, but I cannot see him being a regular in the team. So I would think Kieran Trippier will probably wear the armband. But it set the scene, and it probably, the likes of him and the other signings and the way that we had transformed things led to getting Bruno in, because I think it showed that we were serious about having a go, and what we saw, it was that. So I'm going with Trippier as well.
Yeah, well, I'm going to give my views on Sunday's show with Holly, so I'll skip this. I do know that Joe Walker is going to be coming in at some point as well. I did invite him onto the show. He's just got back in from work, so I think he'll jump on as well. So we'll get his best signing when he joins us. Most improved player, George?
Well, that was probably one of the easiest ones. It's got to be somebody who, for nearly 2 years, I kicked to death for sitting in this chair. Joelinton or Joelinton or whatever we're going to call him. I've never seen ever a player turn around in such a short space of time and have such an impact on the games he was playing in. I mean, I've said over and over again, sitting here, that I struggle to find a footballer in there sometimes. I struggle to see him ever breaking into a sweat, and I couldn't help wondering why they bothered to wash his shirt, because it never got dirty when he was playing. That's all gone, I'm afraid. This last half of the season, he'd just been a different player, different person. Now, yes, Howe and his team have to take some of the plaudits for that, but Joelinton has to too as well, because that doesn't come without some hard work. And it looks like he's obviously working his socks off under the supervision of Eddie Howe, and gone from an non-entity as a centre forward to suddenly becoming a very, very creditable and very, very praiseworthy midfield player who has developed not just an attacking sense, but also, I was looking back some of the videos of games, he also has developed a much better defensive angle to his game as well. So yeah, that wasn't a hard one. Joelinton is my most improved player.
Good stuff. Okay, Joe, welcome, mate. Thanks for jumping on. I did invite you on because obviously, I was aware that you wouldn't be able to get your favourite, your results out for your season. Best signing, Joe, for you?
Playing wise, I think Trippier and obviously Bruno are the obvious ones. But you know what? I think Dan Burns done a sterling job. I think he brought a calmness to the centre of the defence when it was looking like we were floundering. Lascelles was all over the place. So I've been really impressed with the calmness that Dan Burns brought. But actually, do you know, I think the best thing that the club did this season was clean those windows. And I don't say that lightly, because actually, I think that was the first time for me that I thought, hey, we're entering the new era now. So, yeah, I'll go with the window cleaner.
There's the sky.
Absolutely.
Exactly. All right, Mitch, we'll come to you now for most improved player of the season.
I'm going to stick with the fullbacks union and go with Emil Croft. He's another one who took a lot of stick, but I think in his time under the previous manager, he very rarely played as what you'd think of as a proper right fullback. And that's what he was signed as, and that's what he plays in the Swedish team, national team as a right back in a back four. And he was played as a right wing back. He was played as a right-sided centre back in a back three. And he's neither of those. Yes, he might be tall and look like he could do a job in the centre, but that's all he's able to do is a job if you need him to. And he's not as pacey and as attack-minded as, say, Trippier could be in a wing-back role. But to be fair to the guy, particularly once Trippier was injured, he really stepped up to the plate. He became a different player. He became... his defensive positioning was better all around. Now, this has got to be to do with the coaching, I think, personally, that he's been allowed to take up proper positions in his proper role as a right fullback. But also, he seems to have become more aggressive. And I think that's transformed him into more than a capable deputy for Trippier. And in fact, some of the performances he put in contributed to getting some of the results that we have. And again, fair play to him for putting up with the stick and showing the character and the backbone to dig in and turn it around. And I think you could say that for a lot of the squad. But for me, I had a feeling there'd be a lot of Joelinton talk at this point. I felt I had to give Kraft a mention because he really is a very different player to the one that was so playing under Steve Bruce.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, Steve?
Right, 2-1 to Crafton coming up because Joe Linton's the obvious one, and he has made a major transformation. But I think if you look at that midfield, there was times when you had Willock, you had Joe Linton, you had Shelby, and you had Bruno, and it was going to be 3 from 4. And I think we could have coped without Joe Linton playing, despite the fact that he was playing fantastically. But I think it right back when Trippier got injured, everybody expected Manquillo to come in and think that he would do a decent job because he has filled in quite well. We've never seen him at all in the time because Kraft has just made that position his own by being, as Mitch said, a genuine hard tackling and really hard tackling. I've seen him go through blokes and without any problem at all. And we've now seen what he should have been when we signed him. And again, it's the fact that Steve Bruce wouldn't play him in the right place. He wasn't much good as a centre half. If we're playing wing backs, he isn't that great going forward. We'll certainly, as was the case on the Burnley game, Trippier was straight back in, and will take that place. So Kraft will be enabled deputy next season. But I think from what we did see and the fact that he stepped up immediately into the role of somebody who was likely to be one of the star players of the season after his start, Trippier. I think he did a fantastic job. So he would be my most improved player. But again, can I just mention 2 more? I think Fraser and Shaw also were a lot better in the second half of the season. Whether anybody else is going to go up with them or say something, I'll let them do that.
Okay, Steve Hasty.
Emil Kraft. Had to go from. I just thought exactly what Mitch said. And the other thing being that he came in and performed after Trippier was injured. He knew what his role had to be. He knew how strong he had to be. He knew he had to put performance, and he was getting stick at the same time from various sections of the fans who didn't rate him. And I thought for that, mentally, I thought he was so strong. I thought physically he put in some great performances and he helped steady the ship. He helped make us solid at that particular time when we could have gone off the rails again after losing Trippier. So for me, I'm going to go, even though we probably could spend a programme just talking about Joe Linton, I'm going to go for Emil Kraft.
Okay, Kraft flying ahead. Stu, are you going to pull him back in, or are you going to add to the chorus of approval for Emil Kraft being the most improved?
Well, at this stage, I thought it would have been the Joelinton Lovin, so I was expecting a clean sweep. But there's a few names that do deserve a mention. To me, Shelby's been most improved. Well, not the most, but he's improved greatly from the performances. But I hasten to give it to him because he has the ability. We know he's got the ability, and that was a lot more of attitude than anything else. And then there's a couple of others like Fraser and Shaw that have been mentioned. But these are international players, and there's no way that they were bad to start with. So that leaves the side between Kraft, who is also an international player, to be fair, and Mr. Joelinton. And I think, to me, it has to be Joelinton. From what he was to what he is, I've never seen that in a footballer for Newcastle United ever. And I'm sure George hasn't, and he's been watching him for 40 years longer, well, not 40 years, 30 years longer than I have. So you take all this into consideration. Well, of course we do. Joelinton, when he was, or Joe Linton, just to keep the popular thing, he was a big lad, but whoever was marking him could just like sneeze and he would fall over, and he looked disinterested and like he wasn't there, and I think that's what got on most people's back. I remember Mitch, we were watching one against Norwich a couple of seasons back, and we said he's either trying to get sent off or he's trying to get subbed. He was just not putting it in, and that's unforgivable. But I think it's maybe it's the weight of the number 9 shirt getting taken off him, the fact that Bruce had gone, who there could have been a language barrier, or he just didn't trust him, or he both ways that is, or he didn't believe in him, both ways again. Then with it's one of these things, everything happens for a reason and stuff like that. And when Kieran Clark got sent off and they had to shuffle the pack and Joelinton got put back into the midfield, And he seemed to like just change from this chump into a champ, didn't he? He won a tackle, and the fans cheered him, and you could just see this weight getting lifted off him. And he started airing about like a madman, didn't he, for the last hour? Like he's put himself about. And then it was if like the next game after that, and the game after that, the game after that, he turned from paper mache into steel, and he just had so much belief in himself, and people were bouncing off him. And you could see the confidence grow match by match inside of him, to the point where he may be over too confident now, where he did dip towards the end of the season. And he is now realising that it's a physical game, but what he can't be doing, he'll end up getting set off for us, is when he starts pushing people over all the time. It's great that he's defending his teammates like he did at Tottenham, but you start doing it every match, the referees watch and stuff like that. But for what he was at the start of the season to what he is now, and there's talk of him being put in the Brazil squad, and that doesn't happen by fluke unless your name's Fred. You know, you have to be a serious talent to get in the Brazil squad, and it has to be Joelinton. For the transformation, never seen before. I don't think we'll ever see it again with the type of players we're going to bring in.
Okay, Joe, most improved player of the season.
Yeah, I think there's only one answer for me, Steve. I think Stu's just hit the nail on the head. It's got to be Joelinton. I just think in terms of, the lad was down and out, and, people were actually questioning whether he was a footballer, never mind a Brazilian footballer. I know he doesn't pull trees up every single week, and whatever happened when that change of position, there was a shift in his mentality and a definite shift in his mindset. I've never seen a footballer come back from the brink like it. Yes, I was thinking of Ryan Fraser before Steve mentioned him there, because again, there was another player that was down and out, not putting a shift in, looked completely disinterested, and all of a sudden got his spark back. We've got to mention Emil Kraft, because again, he's unfashionable. Not many people fancied him. He never pulled any trees up when he played, but he didn't let us down either. So it could go either way, but for me, it has to be Joelinton, simply because I've never seen anything like it.
It was like a Rocky film, wasn't it?
Yeah,
like absolutely. Season.
Absolutely mental. It really was. Great though. Let's hope he continues like that next season. Okay, before the ad break and Ask George, we're going to best match or performance of the season, George.
Oh, for me, that was the easiest category. The Arsenal game was just absolutely fantastic. I mean, come on. When was the last time we played a game, even at home, and had nearly 75% of the possession? I mean, we hammered Arsenal. It was 2-0, but it could have been 4 or 5 if with a little bit of luck. And the best compliment I can pay to them is when I came home and thought about it. I felt, for the first time for a long time, I seen a game which could actually be in the same class as some of the games we saw with the entertainers, and that's how much praise I would give that game. But I mean, it was just non-stop from beginning to end, and I would love to see us next year starting more games like that, not just sitting back and let somebody push us. Let us push them games, because Arsenal would just bewildered. I mean, the press, annoyingly as usual, spent more time telling me how bad Arsenal played and very little time about how good we were. But it was the Arsenal game was absolutely outstanding for me.
Okay, I keep forgetting to read this question out, Steve. Alan Little keeps asking, did your dad teach him at St Mary's in Benton?
Yes.
Right, there you go. Sorry, Alan. Every time it comes up, you're right. Steve's head is always down. And then obviously I'm watching comments and I completely miss it. So there we go. Happy days. Don't send a follow-up question. It'll take another 6 weeks, Alan. Mitch, your match or performance of the season?
Another tick in the box for that performance against Arsenal for me. I've not seen us dominate a team like that for a while. I've not seen us take one of the so-called big six and not just bloody their nose, but really rub their face in the dirt and get them after the game having players questioning the desire of their own players. I mean, and as my dad rightly says, the press talk about how bad Arsenal were. We made them that bad. It's as simple as that. We didn't give them a chance. And if we can put that level of effort, and I think we have put that level of effort into a lot of games. The other game that springs to mind is the Leicester game at home, where we won in the dying minutes of the game. That was a similar kind of performance in many ways, and I think, but to do that, what we were told was a wounded animal coming up after getting beaten in a local derby, and they were desperate for Champions League football, and they were going to do this and they were going to do that, and they did nothing. And why they did nothing was we didn't let them. It was as simple as that. We just didn't let them. Dominant, classy, dangerous from the first minute to the last. Yeah, it's got to be that game.
Yeah. Can you find a game, Steve Wilkinson, that betters the Arsenal performance, or are you going to shock us all?
Well, Joel know that often they give betting on races without the favourite. So I don't know what he would put a second favourite in this, but it's clearly Arsenal's miles out and ahead. And as George says, it takes you back to the classics that we've had and the Barcelonas and those sort of games and the 5-0s. It was that sort of occasion. But I looked to see what I would think was the second best, and I picked the Leeds game because it was the turning point for me. We just played Cambridge, we'd lost against them, we drew against Watford at home, and despite the fact that the signings had started, although at that stage we'd only had Trippier and Chris Wood in, you still feared a bit that things weren't going to change. But that performance at Leeds, where we're probably expected to go down, despite the fact that they weren't doing very well, was a real battling performance. And as the game wore on, you sensed we were going to get something out of it. And then obviously we did with the free kick from Shelvey, and it was the start. We went off to Saudi after that, and a fantastic team bonding that came. And then we'll have the two, followed by the 2 home games, Everton and Villa, where we had a 3-game winning run, and that when we started to pull out of the bottom 3 for the first time. So I would say that was the catalyst game for building was the Leeds game.
Okay, good stuff, Steve Hasty. We seem to be stuck on 2 games, mate, and no surprise that nothing seems to be coming from the first part of the season.
No, you know why? Because the first part of the season we picked up 9 points, we had 9 draws, and the rest of them were defeats. And even after Eddie Howe took the job, we were still in that mindset of we couldn't win, but we could sometimes occasionally claw out a point. And for me, that is why this Leeds game was the match of the season, because it was the turning point, as Steve rightly says. We went into that game, and I think yes, it was fantastic support because we're getting that at every away game. But I think the majority of people went into that game thinking, we're kind of by a win. We've got VAR against, we've got referees against, we've got linesmen against, we've got the TV against, you name it, it's against us. Even the weather was against us. But we went into that game and we came out with a point. With 3 points, a go by Shelvey, as Steve says. But when you look at the team, and I wrote the team down because I thought it was important for people to realise who was playing in that game. Dubravka, Trippier, Dummett, he went off injured. Lascelles, he went off injured. Shaw, Shelvey scored the goal. Willock, Joe Linton, Fraser, St. Maximum and Wood. And on came in the replacement for those 3 injured. We had Longstaff, Clark and Manquillo. And I think to a man, everybody after that match went, you know what? How good did the 3 substitutes play when they came in, and how important was that? And as Steve then says, and quite rightly, we then went away to Saudi and we went on a run after that. The team bonding that took place must have been high as a kite when they got on that plane, because they'd finally won a game. Yes, we'd had 1 previous win against Burnley at home, but we'd either drawn or we got hammered in games. And we went in and we played Everton, we played Villa, we got a point off West Ham, we beat Brentford, we beat Brighton, we beat Southampton. And that was after we came back. So for me, that was the turning point. And that was the point at that Leeds game. And then what followed showed that we could get out of this league. And yes, we got beat off Chelsea, we got beat off Everton, we got beat off Spurs. but then went on a run again. You know, because we didn't play badly against Chelsea and we didn't play badly against Everton. You know, we just had some nut out tied himself to a post for 15 minutes and dragged out the injury time. But then we beat the Watfords, Leicester, Palace, Norwich, and obviously the game that has already been mentioned, the Arsenal game. But for me, this was the turning point, and this was where I suddenly got faith in Eddie Howe as well, because that was important. Because I had been critical of Eddie Howe because I couldn't see, and I put it on Twitter and I got ripped apart. I couldn't see anything that was different because we weren't getting the results. I wasn't seeing anything that I felt as though he could motivate that squad. The performance might have been slightly better than under Bruce at that particular time and moving into it. But remember that horrible cup match that we had? It was absolutely shocking. The performance the following week against Watford when we drew 1-1 still wasn't much better, and we just thought we're back to the same old crap. But that's the point where I suddenly got the belief, and that little break, and then them hearing how well they enjoyed the trip, and you know, some of the videos and the little interviews that we picked up on, and things that we heard from the people out in Saudi at the time, and then when we came back. So for me, that was the turning point this season. So that makes it the performance of the season, because it makes it the most important game of the season for me, because it's when my belief really, really held true. And I thought, you know what, yeah, we can do this. And from that moment, from that game on, and those performances, even though we had those 5 defeats against what was basically, you know, the top 4 plus the Everton game, as it actually finished in Chelsea, Spurs, Liverpool and City. For me, they showed the professionalism, and they showed that they had the winning mentality again. So, Leeds all round.
Okay, Stu.
And I thought at this stage it would have been another clean sweep for Arsenal. But I wanted a request to be put in front of the two Steves, because I'd picked Leeds away. I was going to pick the Everton game because there was only 1-3-1. But joking aside, I thought the Leeds game, it's something I say to people who come to start working for us when they're doing sales. I talk about blind squirrels. Every blind squirrel can find a nut. But the ones with their eyes up will find more than one. And at this stage of the season, it was just after the Cambridge game, as Steve Hasty said most of the things I'm going to say anyway, but it was just after that, and the doubt started creeping back into the fan base, hadn't it, when the euphoria of the takeover, it seemed to be like, well, come on. The fans were then getting a bit angst and itchy about who we're buying, why we're signing people. It's now the 12th of January or something. We haven't signed Maradona or anyone like this, you know. And then to go to Leeds, and I thought, right, this blind squirrel is not blind anymore, because we found a second nut. It was our second win of the season. And I think it gave the players belief. I think the manager always had belief anyway that he could keep us up. But he needed the players to believe, and it made the fans start believing, like, you know what, we can actually do it. And to me, it was the manner that we did it as well. I know that you were there, Steve, but I think... I know Steve Hastie's just read the team out, but even when you mention the subs, the Kieran Clarkson and Q's, the Longstaffs, not fans' favourites at all, but to a man, everyone was up for it, and it was a proper roll your sleeves up performance, a bit like the Derby away game back in the day that Mitch refers to as his favourite game. You know, it was us against the world. We're going there to get trounced, and had Leeds beat us that day, they would have opened a gap. I think it would have been 9 or 10 points ahead of us. And then you start thinking, oh, then this is a bit too much now. And they've got the goal there through Shelby. And to be fair, we could have scored 2 or 3 by the end of it. And that was the game where Willock got better and better as the game went on. The first 30 minutes, he was anonymous, and he just grew in stature and grew in confidence. And the team seemed to mirror him. And at the end, I know he was probably that tired he couldn't shoot the ball hard enough or kick the ball hard enough. But I just thought every one of them left everything on that pitch. And that's what we've been crying out for such a long time. And it was one of those moments where it was a 1-0 win, but to me it felt like a 5-0 win, because you know you just burst with pride with the performance that the lads had put in for us. And that then started something. I know we had the break in Saudi straight after, but that was important as well, because imagine getting beat and then going to Saudi. Imagine what the press would have been like, what the fan base would have been like. You're going off on a jolly in the warmth, and we're in Newcastle, it's freezing cold, and you're in. It was such a critical win, and then to come back and do what we did, I just thought, to me, that was the standout game. Performance-wise, obviously, Arsenal, because from start to finish, Arsenal, it was men against boys, and Arsenal were frightened. The boys were frightened of the crowd, of the players. But it has to be the Leeds game for me. That was the catalyst. That was our springboard for how we finished the season. And just to answer a few questions, this is Al Hilal top, which is a Saudi team. Gary Milligan's not the only one supporting Scotland. I'm certainly supporting Scotland today, and I'm fully aware it's Scotland and Russia versus the rest of the world. But this is football, not politics. So I'll be cheering on JC and his team tonight.
Come on, John Carver and the boys. Joe, your most memorable game or best performance, what was it this year?
Can I just check if you buggers been primed with the questions? Because I'm getting thrown right under the bus here. You're throwing stats out in teams, and
we just
I guess.
So do you normally make it up? Do you normally make it up on a Friday, Joe? Do you normally make it up on a Friday? The tips.
I think there's a couple for me, Steve. I think there's the very obvious one, which was the Arsenal game. So let's start with that. In terms of performance, we were absolutely outstanding. And like Stewie said, we stuck it to them. And I just thought we were better than them all over the park. The one that really stood out for me, though, was on the 17th of October, which was the Tottenham game, which was the first game at home after the takeover. And yes, we lost the football match, and we weren't particularly any better than we were, the week before when Mr. Ashley was in charge. But walking up to the ground felt different. The drummers were there, the chants were starting, the flag was back, and all of a sudden you thought, hang on, something feels very, very different here from the football club. So the Tottenham game will stick out in my mind. But the game, I think, for me, that I thought was the outstanding one, there was two under the lights, actually. One was Manchester United, and I think it was the first time where we've seen, we should have beat them, we should have won that game. I thought we matched them all over the park, and how on earth we didn't win it, I'll never know. But again, that was the first time when you start to think, we're not just getting rolled over now, and we're not just getting battered off people. So Man United, but for me, it had to be the Everton at home game. I think there was a lot of pressure going into that game. We went 1-0 down. It was the big battle at the bottom of the league of which of the big old famous clubs was going to get relegated. We went 1-0 down, and you're absolutely fearing the worst. And to see a Newcastle United side not roll over, not get our bellies tickled, we equalised pretty much straight away, and I thought after that we just blew them away. The team were fantastic, the atmosphere was fantastic, so I'm going to say the Everton at home game.
Okay, a vast array of games there, and still a couple of categories to go. Stay tuned in. We're going to give a shout out, though, as we always do at this time, to our sponsors. Thanks to Spider Miner, worldwide coverage from the lads, the only cryptocurrency miner that can mine 5 different cryptocurrencies at the same time, whilst using virtually no energy, and it's VPN protected. Buy yours now at www.miner.spidervpn.com. Thanks to the lads at skipsandbins.com. Telephone 0800 25 45 25 3. Email inquiries at skipsandbins.com. Website www.skipsandbins.com. Easy contract, free and pay-as-you-go waste collection. Thanks also to L&G Family Funeral Directors, 0191 389 7245. And the Garden of Healing Dispensary, CBD Hemp and Cannabinoid Specialists, www.thegohd.com. Thanks to John at qtechshop.co.uk, the makers of pool tables and snooker tables in Wallsend, Newcastle, and the guys who run our website, NUFCmatters.com. And thanks to ClearKai, meet the new Game Over screen, drop into a ClearRun device near you, available on Apple Store, Google Play, and clearrun.game. Thanks to Neil Jackson at Media Arts for all the help with the video side of things. If you want to subscribe, we're still doing 7 shows a week during the summer. Hit the Newcastle Legends logo in the right-hand corner and you can subscribe for free. Hit the thumb up under the video to like the video, click share to share to your social media, and drop into the comments box, speak to like-minded Newcastle fans. If you want a notification of when we're going live, hit the little bell on the left-hand side and you can pick when you get notified for certain shows or all the shows. But make sure you do that and you won't miss a show coming up on the channel. Also available as a podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and the rest. Usually goes up 24 hours after the show on YouTube. If you want to become a member, you can either join YouTube by clicking join, which is underneath this video, or you can spend a little bit more money and go into the prize, which everybody's after at this moment in time. Join the cult. You get a pen, you get a cup, you get a scarf, a membership card, and entry into the monthly draw. And the monthly draw, which is 2.5 weeks away, will be for a season ticket in the Platinum Club or a money equivalent of £1,000. So well worth joining the cult, a one-off fee, and the monthly draw takes place next month. So get yourself involved in that. You can go to NUFCmatters.com and you can find membership on there, or put your phone over the top of the QR code and it will take you straight to that section on the website. Don't forget as well, if you want a car sticker, then all you have to do is subscribe. John will then send you a car sticker out. You just need to email him at the website, nufcmatters.com. We also support the food bank, and it's vitally important you donate still during the closed season. nufcfansfoodbank.co.uk is how you do that. And you just need to go there and use the virtual bucket to make a donation. We are still selling tickets for the Summer Do, Friday the 24th of June. Entry-only tickets, £12. VIP, £15. An evening with Mick Lowes and Andy Griffin at Shearer's Bar. And tickets are starting to go quite well for this one. So make sure you get yours, nufcmatters.com. And we will see you there that night. And online now, $2.99 a ticket. Still running the Alan Shearer ball raffle. Make sure you enter that. We are going to draw that very, very soon. $2.99 to win a signed Alan Shearer ball. And thanks to Chris Hall and John from QTech, they have bought tickets for this. This is a charity screening in the memory of my mother. The Craze Gangsters Behind Bars at the Tyneside Irish Centre in the concert room. And it kicks off at 12 o'clock on the day, screening at 12:30. And all proceeds are going to St Bede's Palliative Care Unit of the hospital at the Queen Elizabeth in honour of the treatment that they gave my mum. So if you want to go to that, there are a few freebies. How do you get your freebie? Email John at nufcmatters.com and he will sort that out for you. And don't forget, we are doing a vote on the website, which we will be announcing the winner of on Friday. And you just need to vote for your player of the season. So get involved, go to nufcmatters.com and place your vote today. And just want to say well done to George for his Those Were the Days show. He did his first one at the weekend. It was a big success. I know a lot of people really enjoyed it. And we will be doing the next one at the weekend. And well done to Joe as well on his debut in the transfer show. Came ably prepared. And thanks to everybody for tuning in and the compliments that they've given us for both those new shows over the summer. And don't forget the Sam Fender t-shirt. £200 I think it's at the moment with Vince Smith bidding. The highest bid so far. It will be signed by Sam. And again, that's pinned at the top of my Twitter at Steve Wraith. All proceeds are going to the food bank as normal. And thanks everybody who moderates on the channel as well. Big shout out to you, doing a cracking job as usual tonight. Okay, it is that time of the night where we...
Steve, just before you go on, I want to buy 10 tickets for the thing for your mum, but give them to Steve Hasty to distribute to the workers at the food bank.
Oh, thanks very much, Stu. Much appreciated, mate. Thank you.
When I get back to Borrian on Friday, I'll transfer the money to Stevie Notes. I know how to do it.
Thanks very much, mate. Much appreciated. No okay, time for Ask George. Okay, Ask George. And Sefton Mag was in with this one. Good evening. Can you ask George if he remembers the time when you would buy peanuts and you would throw coins at the seller in a white coat for a small bag of peanuts?
And if you get half a bag of peanuts by the time it reached you are bloody lucky, because they used to spread all over the place. I mean, it was like raining peanuts in the Gallagher corner, I remember. And yes, I remember it very well. And indeed, sometimes the seller would try and throw them into the crowd and miss them. So if you're one of the kids like I used to be, sitting on the wall around the cinder track at St James, he used to get half a bag of peanuts for now because he'd drop it. You know, yes, I remember it very well.
Great stuff. Donald's come in with this one.
Tanner a bag, wasn't it? 2.5p.
Yeah.
Donald says, question for George. If you were to pick a Newcastle United unsung heroes 11, can you name 3 players that you would include?
Wow, that's a good one. Well, one I talked about at the weekend, because I think it surprised you and one or two others. A little man called Ernie Taylor. I don't think he ever got the credit for the player he was, and went on to have an even better career after he left us. I mean, he was so good in the cup final against Blackpool. I told, well, anybody watched on Sunday would hear us say this. That Stanley Matthews went to the Blackpool manager and directors and said, I want him inside me on the right wing at Blackpool next season. And Ernie Taylor went to Blackpool for 25 grand, which was a big price. And he doubled his salary, of course, because Sebo was the manager and he tried to persuade him to stay, but he couldn't because Blackpool were doubling his wages. So Ernie Taylor's one. Next one. We've had some sensational fullbacks at Newcastle who really didn't get much credit for what they did. One of the best ones, I think, was David Craig, who played for Northern Ireland. David Craig was a brilliant fullback, and I don't think people recognised him for what he was, but he was top class. He would take some beating, and then after that, I'd go into the centre half regime. We've had a few stalwarts at centre half and one or two who've saved the club in some ways, like Killick and Klein. But we've had others who really didn't get credit for what they were doing. And I think one of them was Bob Stokewell. I think he came in at a difficult time when Brennan was gone and was starting to have problems with Harvey and people like that. And Bob Stokewell came and stood in and filled the gap, which I don't think he ever got credit for. But it was nice he got credit later on for something else he did. So that's 3 off the top of my head.
Okay, great stuff. Moment of the season then, George. Getting back to basics.
This season or?
No, yeah, this
sorry.
season, mate. Yeah,
All
we're
right.
back into the show now.
We're back on the script now, all right? Yeah, okay.
Not the
well,
script. Tell George.
It had to. Sorry, it had to be for me. One of the players who makes me smile because he smiles all the time is Midgie. And the moment of the season for me, because the way the goal was constructed by Bruno, was Midgie's goal against Crystal Palace. And he did for us what he does for his country quite regularly. He outstripped the defender with his pace. He was strong enough to hold the defender off because that defender could easily have pushed him over. And he still had the nous to able to welly it past the goalkeeper. So that was a joyous moment of the season for me.
Okay, Mitch.
Very simple one for me, the announcement of the takeover. Getting the club out the hands of Mike Ashley was a journey that started for me when I was suddenly interim chair of the trust. And that journey, both yourself and Steve and my dad and Stu have been part of along the way in one way, shape, form or another. Going through Yes We Can to Canadian interest twice, to Steve coming over and talking to Mid-Hat and God knows what else in between. But also, and I don't think I'm breaking any confidences now, to have been invited as part of it, with yourself and Steve Hasty and John Woff, to speak to Amanda and Merdad on occasion, and to see and feel very directly a very unique and personal insight into the emotional roller coaster that we saw there, from Amanda in particular. You could read whether she was up or whether she was down, and whether it was good news or bad news just by looking at her. Body language was very, very palpable. And for whatever small role and very privileged role that we've all had along the way, everybody who watches these shows and who's listening to anything my dad says knows what Newcastle United means to me and my family, and going back through time. And to see the club taken out of the hands of Ashley and put into somebody who, pardon the language, actually gives a fuck, actually cares the way we care, who actually has the passion to come out and say something like, for example, in an interview, we need to be appointing a manager who's not frightened to be relegated. That's ballsy. That's sticking it out there. That's saying, I'm up for this fight, are you up for this fight? And they've brought all along with it. And I've got to say, when the takeover, the moment the penny dropped for us was when we got sent something that had been leaked from, I think, an airport in Oxfordshire, with a flight manifest with all the names on. And the penny dropped that it was actually happening. And I think I was at work and I just had to sit down and I actually had a few tears. It was that emotional. It was that big of a wave of emotion to me to say, hey, this is actually happening. Something that I've spent in one way, shape or form 14 years of my life battling Mike Ashley. To then sit down and say, well, it was over and we've been taken along the ride in some small way ourselves, and what a privilege that was. And I don't know if I'll ever be able to thank Amanda and Merdad enough for the time and effort that they put in and gave back. Even just to be a small voice in the background to be heard. And I think we're now in a position where we could be in the next few years a global player in the world of football. How immense is that? And yes, it comes with its connected difficulties. And with that kind of power comes responsibility. And we as a fan base, I think, are showing ourselves that when we act together, when we unite, and when we get behind things, and that we're in a position to interact with people in Saudi and help them on their journey towards change. And as Stu sat there in Riyadh now, you know, such a different place to when he first went there, and certainly a different place to when we first came to the Middle East. And absolutely, if we can be part of that change, and that's a real privilege. And I think we've got to start looking at the positives and the opportunities we have as a fan base, because that then comes back to our region in tenfold, not just through the club, but through economy and opportunities that are potentially legion. And we're in a position to go global in a way that we've probably never ever considered. And that moment will live long in my memory.
Steve Wilkinson, how do you follow that?
Well, it was the day I went to the Glen Moray distillery in Elgin, in Scotland. And have you got the photo I sent Steve as well?
I have, mate. Bear with us.
Well, on the way back, I was staying near Inverness, and on the way back, I went past Forres Mechanics Football Club. Now, Forres Mechanics play in the Highland League in Scotland, and what is it, probably the equivalent of the National League down there. And as I was driving down the road, there was a thing that came on the news on Talk Sport. And now, if I tell you that the date was October the 7th and it was 5:15, you'll know what I'm talking about. And it's exactly what Mitch has just said. You can take that picture off now, Steve. But that ground is just, you know, we could have been that. You know, if we'd slid down under Ashley and just disappeared, that's the sort of level you could have been dropping down to. That you know, clubs have gone out of business, and you know we were heading downwards. But that was the turning point. It was the announcement of the takeover that I heard on Talk Sport. I wish I'd been in Newcastle, because I would have been at St James's like the thousands, and I watched on Sky Sports that night, and you know, could pick up the atmosphere that way whenever they were going over every hour, because it was the only story they were talking about that night, and it was just a great feeling to even feel it from there. So from me, a little toast to Amanda and all the rest of them with a glass of a wee dram of Glen Moray.
This is cruelty. This is cruelty.
Steve Hasty, are you going by the 7th of October?
Yeah, 7th of October, and everything that preceded it and everything that's followed it is small change compared to, in an emotional way, compared to that particular day. Just like Mitch says, what you and myself and John and Stewie and also Keith Patterson, let's not forget the role that Keith played in this takeover, despite what many people out there will never, ever get through their thick skulls. The work that he did, and we were privileged, and it was quite strange because we were in an amazing position because we were involved listening to Keith, involved with hearing what Keith was doing. Keith was very, very good in terms of sharing what he could about his role and what was happening and the timings, etc. And you know why I think that was where we knew that there was only one way this was going to play out, but it was all hinging on when, and also because of what we'd done previously. And as Mitch said, we'd had it since 2008. When Ashley started, and we went there on the very first protest march, and then we set up NUFC and then NUST, and then all of the other the discussions we had with various people over the years, whether it was Graham Roberts and Kevin Sheedy, or David Speedy, wasn't it? Kevin Sheedy, what am I talking about? Speedy, and the takeover that they tried, the various other ones that came through over the years, and being privileged in a way, but not in so much as we didn't get the success that we were looking for, and everything. And then when it all fell into place, and I think we all knew we were pretty fairly certain that if the cat case was allowed to happen, and when they went to that tribunal, we knew that it had already been done and dusted, because on that day, on the 29th of September, if you remember. That was where the Premier League blabbed, or the Premier League's legal team blabbed, that there was an arbitration process set for the 3rd of the 1st. And you go, you haven't even got that date right. It's a bank holiday, you idiot, you know. And you just thought they're floundering, they're all over the place. And then it was only a matter of a week later, and as Mitch rightly says, you know, we got the tip off that there was things happening. Poor Keith was sitting on tender hooks for the week, but I think he'd been sitting on tender hooks for the previous year. And remember what a lot of people also said, there was this case, this cat case, or this arbitration case, or whatever it was. Ashley wasn't interested in selling the club. That's what the doubt has hammered down.
Steve, sorry, we're just losing you a little bit there with the internet, mate. So we've got your gist, though. We've got your gist. It was just starting to fade off. Stu?
Well, I'm just going to have to echo just about everything that Steve Hasty said. It was the 7th of October. I was in Tenerife. I flew there the day that from Bahrain to Dubai to Madrid to Tenerife. Was on all these flights during the cat case here, and the free run for it. So every time I got off the plane, I was getting updates. I was ringing Mitch. I was texting Steve, I was getting a hold of Keith, and all this information was going backwards and forwards, and then had another 4-hour flight, and eventually, the way, once you started catching up with what happened, the way that the case got put against the Premier League and how amateurish they were, it was only a matter of time then that we didn't think it was going to be 1 week later, to be fair, but we knew it was a case of we were going to win the cat case. The cat case was there to be won. As let's just say that it was Daniel Joe that was doing it, but Nick DeMarco was sitting there. And then for a few days before the 7th of October that week, we were in our little network, I suppose, we were getting more and more information, which was leading towards it's going to happen. But we'd crossed this bridge too many times before, where we were told it was definitely happening, and then it didn't. And it's so. Like Mitch, you're scared to get too excited because it was the fear of being let down once again. And we were in touch and distance. And then when they announced that the Saudi government had paid money to be in, you knew it was happening, because to this day, if that takeover hadn't happened, they'd still be waiting for that money. I can absolutely guarantee you that they'd still be waiting for that money. But there's no way Saudi or the BIF could own a football team in the UK and not have it on legal TV. So once that was done, it was good to me. It had to be within days, and as it happens, within hours. And I spoke to Keith the day before, and you, there's someone who had the best secret in the world. He's like, you can't tell anyone, son. You can't tell anyone, son. You can't. It's happening. It's happening. But again, I'd heard that from Keith before, and he'd heard it from me, and we'd all heard it from each other. So when it was officially announced, when it was on Sky Sports, it was officially announced. It was just wow. And then you sit, and I actually had to sit down, and I did have a tear in my eye because it was all the frustration, all the pent up anger, all the embarrassment, everything that went on beforehand had gone, and it was just like it was a start of a new era. And it doesn't matter if we'd got, well, it did, of course, it would matter if we got relegated, but that would have been acceptable to get rid of the previous regime who was just letting this great club rot. And we done it, you know, and it was quite hard to catch your breath. It was emotional. I don't think I'll ever feel like that again, supporting this club, until I see them win a trophy. You know, I see them lift a trophy, preferably at Wembley. I think that's the only thing that could surpass it. And there's one extra thing I wanted to mention that made us so proud. And I wasn't even at the game, but it was the game that Joe mentioned. It was the Tottenham game, the first game of the new era, when the cameras panned in on the chairman, on Yasser Al-Rumayyan, and you see his shock and pleasure at the reception he got and what the fans were like. And he was like, within that blink of an eye, he got the bug. He got the bug of this club and what it meant to people. It was just amazing to see. So yes, definitely the 7th of October.
Joe?
Yeah, very quick one for me. I don't really recall the 7th of October because it was my birthday and I was drunk by about 10:30 on the morning, so I heard it was a good day. I think
Bruce is still in charge.
There was a few bits for me, Steve, and I'm going to link it to NUFC matters, actually. So I don't remember what game it was. Again, there was alcohol involved, but there was a game, I think it was around Christmas time. Mitch was home, Stu Penman was home, and just to have the gang actually together was an absolutely magic moment for me, you know, having the Matters family there. I think a particular highlight of the season, though, thinking about the show, was the takeover special that we did. I think we were all on an absolute high. We got guests coming on, and just that relief. And I remember talking at the time about not only you know how amazing it was for the football club, but how amazing it was for the people who've now become my mates. You know, you guys on the screen, everything that had gone on over the past not only 2 years but 4 years. Seeing Mr. Patterson outside of Patterson Towers with his, you know, with his regalia on, and just that real sense of, hey lads, you know, we've cracked it, and you all played a part in that. And for me to be part of that, you know, to share it with you guys was a bit of a magic moment, really. So yeah, NUFC Matters takeover special.
Brilliant stuff. Okay, guys, I'm going to have to combine the last two because, as you know, I do News of the World at 7:15 tonight. So I'm going to ask you, George, starting with you, for your goal of the season and your player of the season.
Goal of the season has to be for me because of Geordies' football and brain. That was Bruno's back heel at Southampton. And player of the season, it can't be anybody else other than Joe Linton for me. You know, I crucified the lad for 2 years. And then to watch them flower the way he has, player of the year, Joe Linton.
Great stuff, Mitch.
Miggy's goal against Palace and Joe Linton.
Okay, Steve Wilkinson.
Well, I'm going for Bruno's goal against Southampton as well. It was one of those obscene moments when you don't expect the goal, like Cissé's against Chelsea. That it was just obscene goal. You know, he was facing the wrong way and he backheeled it and went in like a bullet. And so that was the goal of the season. And I'm going for Bruno as the player of the season as well, because despite the fact that Joe Linton has been brilliant all the way through in the transformation, Bruno's only played a handful of games. And I think from the first time we saw him, he came on with about 92nd minute against Everton, did a back heel. And we instantly fell in love with him at that moment. And he didn't get a start until, I think it was it the Brentford game or somewhere, and further down the line anyway, or might even be in the Southampton. I think it was a Southampton game. And so he's only started 11 times, scored 5 goals. But we said we didn't need to expect many goals from him, but he's almost one in every 2. So I think the impact he's made, and I'm sure it'll continue as we bring in better players. I'm going for Bruno.
Okay. Yeah, Bruno, very popular. Steve Hasty then.
Goal has to be the Almiron goal against Palace. Went down that wing. Total shock I was in because I expected either hit the corner flag or go out for a throw in, and it didn't. It went into the top corner, and I think I'm still suffering from shock. And player of the season, I've got it at Joe Linton.
Okay, Stu.
Goal of the season, Bruno, but for me it was the one against Leicester, not because of the lung burst and run and the way he threw himself to get on the end of it. It was maybe the timing of the goal, 5th minute of injury time, and the fact when it went in, the palpable relief and the roar on the ground, because I was at that game as well. That was the goal that made us safe. We not mathematically, but we knew we were safe after we won that game. And the 3 of us on the bottom there celebrated long into the night as well. So it would have to be that goal for me, the Bruno's second goal against Leicester. And player of the season, without a doubt, was Bruno. He come in late, but how many times have subs come on at half time or 60 minutes and changed the game and got man of the match? So why shouldn't he get man of the season, player of the season? Even when he didn't start the games, as Steve Wilkinson referred to, the 5 games, it lifted the 3 that were in, the Willocks, the Shelbys and Julie. Performance raised because they knew that this man's waiting to come in. They're watching him in training, thinking it's not going to be me. It's not going to be. He's going to drop 4. So, but when he come in, the talk had been talk, but he walked the walk as well. Sorry, the other way around. He delivered everything that we said.
Come on, Scotland.
See, that's me being sober, but I can't speak properly.
God, you need a drink to get yourself sorted. Aye. Okay, Joe, last but by no means least.
Yeah, very simply for me, it's got to be Almiron's goal for me. I think the ball, if you remember the ball that Bruno played, was absolutely outstanding delivery. He didn't have to break stride. He powered past the fullback and he buried one in the top corner. So that'll do for me. And I never, ever thought I'd live to see the day that Steve Hasty just said that Joe Linton was player of the season. So if it's good enough for Hasty, it's definitely good enough for me. Joe Linton.
Lads, fantastic stuff. Great to hear your views and opinions. We will be back next Wednesday when the transfer window will be about to open, and we'll certainly be covering that over the next few weeks. I'm back 6 o'clock tomorrow with Ross Gregory, who is back off his sick bed. So 6 o'clock tomorrow night, join me and Ross as we look back at the last 7 days at Newcastle United. But tonight, thanks to George, Mitch, Steve, Stu, and Borough Mag, Joe Walker. Thanks, lads. And Stu, I hope you get the result you want, mate.
Thanks a lot, mate.
Come on, Scotland.
Cheers. Let's get there.
Cheers, lads.